Hi, I'm Lindsay Pattison. I'm Chief People Officer at WPP. I'm delighted to have just come off stage at Leaders. Thank you for the invite. Talking today about the people impact with the brilliant Wray, owner of the London Mavericks. So how can talent propel your business? How do you hire, attract and retain brilliant people that will help you win on and off the field? I hope you enjoyed it.
It is a pleasure to be here. I'm Eni Aluko, former professional footballer, sports lawyer, and now football executive and investor in women's football ownership group Mercury 13. I'm delighted to be joined by Lindsay Pattison and Wray, two very experienced leaders of people within business and sport, both former CEOs and, of course, champions of women. Lindsay is the Global Chief People Officer at WPP and former CEO of Maxis, a seasoned media and advertising leader with a career-long passion identifying and developing talent and championing women. Lindsay is also a non-exec director for the Rugby World Cup 2025, which will be here in England. The final will be at this stadium.
September.
Yep. Note the date. Very exciting. We will get into those plans shortly, Lindsay. Lucy is the owner of netball team London Mavericks in the revamped Netball Super League and previously led Saracens as CEO in a very successful 4-year tenure, winning both the championship and premiership. She's an investor with a wealth of experience in organisational strategy, social impact, and building successful teams on and off the court. We will be discussing today the people factor, enabling and inspiring our teams to excel. Lindsay, I'll start with you. WPP is an organisation of over 100,000 employees. That's a lot of people. So what does your role as Global Chief People Officer involve at such a large organisation?
Yeah, I think I'm still figuring that out. So I've been in the role 9 months. I'm really pleased it's called Chief People Officer. So in some organisations it's called CHRO, so Chief Human Resources Officer, which just sounds super functional and quite boring, and really it's about people. And I think when you see brilliant people and leaders on stage, and we were discussing how amazing Jess Smith was earlier, when you have the great leader who is hiring great people, then that's the lifeblood of a business. And at WPP, our greatest cost, also our greatest asset, are people. We spend 10 billion a year on people. So I'm going to argue it's the most important job in the world. And I'm arguing that HR and IT and finance that used to be called back office are business operations and really the oil that help the organizations and maybe the star talent who sit in our agencies, the creative talent, like the sports stars in teams. We're the kind of engine that can help them flourish and grow. And
you've mentioned it there, the sort of different ways that it's been phrased. Why do you think we're seeing more roles like Chief People Officer? Is it sort of a rebrand of a traditional HR role, or is it actually operationally a better focus on people?
Well, that's a good question. I still have to do quite boring HR stuff, like HR information systems. Shoot me if I talk about Workday anymore, or payroll, global consolidation. But actually, it really is about hiring, retaining, developing talent. It's about focusing on D&I. It's about compensation and benefits. So I think people, especially in a world of AI and understanding what makes people, what the skills that are uniquely human, they're going to help us flourish as machines help us to do other tasks more efficiently is really important. Plus, I have no HR qualifications, so I think Chief People is much better.
We'll come on to AI a little bit later. Lucy, with your ownership of London Mavericks, what have been the differences for you from transitioning from CEO to owner?
I'm not sure there's a huge amount of difference. I think you take those kind of learnings and challenges just to a different setting. So, like for me, there's four kind of big challenges that were the same at Saracens as they are when you're setting up London Mavericks, which is, I believe the fish always stinks from the head. So if you've got to build a culture and a vision of values, it's got to come from the top down. And that puts a big responsibility on CEOs, owners, because I don't think you can do that remotely. You've got to show up and you've got to genuinely care for your people, and that takes time because you've got to build deep relationships. The second one is that generally sports teams are loss-making. And one of the big challenges is there's always more calls on capital than there is capital available. So how do you weigh up financial sustainability, long-term enterprise value, and winning on the pitch or court. That's a massive challenge for teams. Another one is you're part of a much bigger ecosystem, so all the other teams in the league itself, the governing body. And to get alignment is very difficult, and collaboration. And I think summed it up by Bernie Eccleston in the F1. He said, it's like 2 hours, a dozen times a year that you're a competitor, and actually teams need to realize that they're business partners for the vast majority of the time. But that is genuinely very, very difficult in team sport to get.
And what has been your biggest challenge so far? Has there been anything unexpected that has sort of thrown you?
No, I don't think so. Generally, because I've learnt the lesson that you have to have people who are better than you around you. Genuinely great people. I loved Jess when she said an all-star team of people, because for me that's what it's all about. It's about great people and keeping them together for as long as possible.
Not dissimilar to sports teams, right? On the field.
Exactly the same. It's the
Playing
same
different
on and
positions.
off. Yeah.
Lindsay, you've shown a career-long passion identifying and developing top talent. Can you share your approach to how to identify and recruit at WPP?
Well, we were joking backstage when we were talking about AIs. Please don't use AI to send in a CV because we can see it a mile away. So I think originality, someone being curious, showing up differently. We're a creative company, so anyone that can stand out in an interview or how they send through or apply for a role. I always hire people, I think as you get more senior in an organization, I would flex or create a role around the right person. If someone is brilliant and they seem brilliant and you can trust your instinct and your gut and ask them interesting questions, then I'll create an entirely different role for them moving forward. But I think what attracts people into an organization is showing that you care about progress. I mean, it's really as simple as that. So especially with a different generation, I think probably the audience here is, I'm older than the majority of the people at our company. I think the average age at WPP is 27, 28, and they have very different expectations of actually what is the company going to do for them versus us bestowing a wonderful job upon them. So it's actually a two-way process in terms of attracting that talent in and showing them how you're going to help then develop and progress is really interesting. So I think hiring in and showing that there's a two-way exchange of what you're going to do is really important. But I hope, and I really do believe, as more standardized roles become more efficient with the use of technology, AI and others, the individuality and curiousness, courageousness and empathy and all of those amazing, uniquely human skills will become really important, and particularly important, I think, for leaders in an organization to demonstrate.
Lucy, I know from my time as sporting director, building the on-the-pitch team is different to building the off-the-pitch team behind the team. How you're building a team now, going into a new season in March 25. How do you go about that, sort of building the team behind the team off the court and then the on-the-court team?
I mean, I don't really differentiate hugely between the two, because I think you're trying to just attract brilliant people, whether they're the athletes or your staff, and good people who are very kind of values driven and like have a high moral code. And like for me, if you can create the team spirit, I think comes from putting people first and making people kind of understand that you genuinely care for them as individuals and not as a kind of commodity or an asset. And I think in a sporting environment, whether it's on the pitch or off the pitch, but if you can get in the mentality of how do you every single day wake up wanting to make your environment a better place for your people to be, for them to flourish in their careers, to be the best possible athlete they can be, but also the best possible people they can be. And I think if you just focus on that one process, you actually won't go too far wrong. Because ultimately, it's one of my favourite quotes, who I guess a few people in this audience have heard, but people don't really care how much you know until they know how much you care. And it's just so powerful.
Yeah, wow, I love that. And that, I think, speaks to the cultural piece, right? You know, how organizations feel culturally. How do you measure that for both of you? You know, how do you measure the culture within your organizations when you bring in good people and highly skilled and highly motivated? but the cultural piece is really important, that underpins all that. How do you measure that? What are the sort of signs that allow you to see good culture versus, bad culture?
I think, well, great culture isn't built overnight. It takes a hell of a long time. But for me, culture is about behaviours, and it's the sum of everyone's individual behaviours. So for me, great culture is about people. And great cultures kind of accept that everyone's different and unique, but they're also a bit like a family where you have respect and inclusion and honesty, which breeds this trust. I think they evolve. They need to evolve. Great cultures don't make excuses. They want to look to do things differently the whole time. And I think in terms of how you create a great culture is leadership. It's a fundamental ingredient for successful businesses and teams. I think accumulated continuity, basically keeping great people together for as long as you possibly can, so that actually you're not recruiting for top talent very often. Right. Because you're trying to keep them all together, or you're religiously looking at succession planning. And then just deeply caring.
It's that retention piece, isn't it? Retention of people. I should say, actually, if anybody wants to ask questions, I've got an iPad that the questions come straight into, so don't be shy if you want to ask any questions. Lindsay, we were talking backstage about AI. And the challenge and the opportunity of AI, and often it's sort of framed as people versus AI. Mm-hmm. At WPP, how do you sort of frame that in terms of how it's going to help the organisation rather than sort of scare people?
Yeah, I mean, I think we're quite lucky in that lucky in many ways, but we bought an AI business called Satalia 4 years ago, thank God, because we can afford it now. So we have about 250 AI experts who can create LLMs on behalf of our clients, but also develop the platforms for ourselves. So we have a platform called Open. It's on my phone. I can go and ask anything in a safe environment, but we can start now using that throughout the creative process. So actually we see it as an enabler or an assistant to brilliant creativity. And yes, it can help you shortcut on some administrative tasks, not to do fake CVs, hopefully. But it can really help enhance the creative process. So I think we are very optimistic about it. We have about 40,000 users of our open platform. It should be 80,000, but give me a couple of months and we will get there. And we survey our employees to ask them how they feel about AI, and particularly our creative or our production community. Production is slightly less optimistic than our creators because, of course, you can imagine AI technology will help speed up and make more efficient some elements of production. But in general, everybody is super optimistic, which is one of our values, helpfully, about how it's going to help them do their job even better. So I think thinking about how it will enhance your role, enhance your creativity, take out some of the stuff that nobody really enjoys doing, and there will be functional areas like payroll that can be in parts of finance that can definitely be outsourced or improved by AI. But I think not being fearful.
Right.
And I think, Scott Galloway, Professor Scott Galloway, if anyone listens to Pivot, the podcast, I highly recommend. He's controversial at times, but he speaks eloquently, and I still think it's incredibly true that AI will not take your job, but somebody that knows how to use AI will take your job. So if you're not using it every day and making it habitual to understand how it can enhance what you do, then you're going to be left behind. It's a bit like old clients I used to talk to who say, oh, I'm not on TikTok or I'm not on Snapchat, I'm not, my kids are. And I'm like, well, shame on you, because you should be. You need to be experimenting with all of those things. So I think the focus for us, and sorry, I could talk about AI for years, is on two things. To make people not fearful of it is upskilling, so training people on how to use the products and platforms that we have, and then reskilling. So there will be new opportunities and actually far more jobs created by AI in the future. We just don't know what all of them are. So we've got a big focus on upskilling and using AI right now on behalf of our clients and WPP, and then reskilling and thinking about the new opportunities in the future. So
and also obviously framing it as an enabler, as an enhancer, rather than something that's going to replace people.
Yeah, I mean, Ginny Rometty, who's the former CEO of IBM, I think 6-7 years ago at Davos, talked about AI being IA, which is an intelligent assistant, and that's how we should think about it.
I like that.
I'm definitely not as eloquent on AI as Lindsay, but someone...
Just say the word LLM a lot, and then people will think you're fine.
Someone said to me the other day that actually AI is going to be brilliant for live sport, because actually AI will give us more free time back, because it will simplify and give us potentially 2 days a week of our lives back. But actually what we will crave is human interaction and live experiences and sharing those magical moments, which is only a good thing for the sports industry.
I agree.
I wanted to talk to you about the sort of competitive environment, in professional sports teams. There's that sort of competition. How do you make sure good culture sort of remains within that sense of, grit and high focus, results orientated competitiveness? Often, it can be at sort of odds with each other. How do you build that and make sure that stays in a professional team?
I think from what I've been really lucky enough to be part of with especially the Saracens men's team as the kind of long-term success is, they invest a huge amount of time into social capital, which is basically just they schedule time in the week for them to build relationships and just understand each other better as human beings. They will actually show a huge amount of vulnerability to each other. And I think that just builds this real kind of sense of, togetherness, and that they can go out and kind of knock each other out on the pitch, but then actually just be like they have their best friendships. They're each other's, groomsmen and godfathers and all sorts of things, and they just build these unbelievably deep relationships because of social capital and the way that the club has gone about making that a real pillar of the working week.
Totally agree. My time at Chelsea is probably the best culture that I was part of. And it's just as simple as going out for food. My strike partner was from South Korea, didn't speak a lick of English. I went for South Korean food with her, and all of a sudden, I knew her better as a person, and we scored lots of goals. So it is fostering those sort of deeper human connections that I think can help in a competitive environment.
Yeah.
Lindsay, I want to talk to you about Walk the Talk. Love the name. It's the initiative that you created for women in leadership and gender equality at WPP. The numbers, and correct me if the numbers are wrong, but 54% of senior managers are female, 42% of the board is female. Just excellent numbers. Yeah. How have you established so many women in leadership at WPP via Walk the Talk?
So Walk the Talk, and I did deliberately call it that because I was quite bored of people just talking about gender equality. I was like, could we actually do something about it? So I was global CEO of Maxis, which is a media agency at the time, and I got some lovely awards in New York for a woman to watch or something, and I was like, okay. I had to do a thank you speech, and I began to realize it was a bigger deal than I thought, because some people seemed to have flown in their families, which I definitely didn't do. But I thought, why am I getting the award? And I think slightly tragically, I was getting the award because I was the only female global CEO, so it felt slightly tokenistic, but I still took it. I was like, okay, well, I've got a stage now. But really, what could I do with that power? So I created a program called Walk the Talk, and also Mind the Gap, which was about closing the gender pay gap. But Walk the Talk was about addressing internal barriers versus societal or cultural barriers for how women could get to the top. So addressing imposter syndrome, tackling the whole messy self that women tend to bring to work, encouraging them to get rid of gremlins, climb the fear ladder, you can tell it's a program, but thinking about their bigger game and the bold moves they will get there. So now we have had about 3,500 women that expanded out across WPP after the pilot in Maxis around the world have walked the talk. I'm going to Singapore actually on Saturday for one in Asia. So I'm really proud that there's kind of an alumni now of women around WPP who have a common framework and a language that they can use to help encourage each other to get to the top. And of course, it's not at the expense of men. It's just trying to level the playing field. And a lot of the exercises you do are as relevant for men, but we make sure before we start the program that bosses, who can often still be men, are brought on board, that they understand what we're unleashing, because of course the women come back and they want to change everything and take over the world, so we're like, just watch out when they come home. But I'm still very proud that we've managed to maintain that program.
Amazing. As a former athlete, I know the athlete mindset has stayed with me as I've come into the executive role. A recent Ernst & Young report stated 94% of C-suite women have played sports, which shows that there's a very clear link between sport participation and successful business careers for women. Is this something that you both look at when you're recruiting, you know, women who've sort of actively played in professional sport?
I don't know. I don't know if it's something actually I look at when I'm recruiting, because I kind of just think the best person for the job, kind of regardless of. But I do think personally, like playing a high-level sport teaches you how you deal with failure, like resilience, knockbacks, injuries, how you get back from injuries, discipline, all of those good things that actually is massively helpful. I think also in the sports industry, which is still very heavily male dominated, it does give you a little bit more credibility as well. Shouldn't do, but I think it does.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well, we're going to think forward a little bit for 2025. Lindsay, the Rugby World Cup is coming to England. You'll be the integral part of the organisation as a non-executive director. What are the key things that you are considering in terms of delivering a home Rugby World Cup?
Well, I'm worried now because our brilliant MD is sitting, and Jill, our chair, are sitting in the front row. I think it's really important, as many of the speakers today, so when talking about both football or basketball, bringing the women's game to life across multiple sports, encouraging young women in to participate in sport and understanding and seeing people that might look a bit like them and understanding it's fun, it's competitive, that winning is great, that there's an environment, I think is really important. And I think, as everyone knows, the Lionesses have done a tremendous job by, you know, thanks to the investment from many organisations within the UK, and we're grateful certainly for the Rugby World Cup, that UK sport is a key contributor to that. But investing in women's sport actually has a ripple effect across society. So I think we're really excited to make sure the tournament is a sellout. So buy your tickets, August 22nd, Stadium of Light, Sunderland. The final will be September the 27th. But there's 8 different venues around the UK. So we're really trying to bring rugby to outside of the traditional home. So we definitely want to sell out. We want to make it super engaging and heavily involved from a participation and fan engagement perspective. And then also leave that legacy, so encourage young people into the game, and lofty goals. So wish us luck.
I'll come to watch some games.
Yeah.
And Lucy, for you, obviously, Mavericks will be playing in the revamped Netball Super League with an under-23s league as well, which was brilliant to see. How are you looking to build a winning team that's going to compete in a new league?
God, without sounding like a broken record here, but you know, I believe like we've got Tamsin Greenway and Camilla Buchanan and Mickey Austin. There's 3 brilliant people, but also brilliant coaches. I think, you know, we've got a great CEO, Kieran Cromby. We've hired well. We've done exactly what Jess summarised really well in terms of focusing on getting great people, focusing on who we are, what our vision is, what we want to try and achieve, and then really focusing on revenue and how we're going to, because that's ultimately what's going to power it, is the investment and money behind it. But yeah, I mean, super excited. I'm sitting here, and every day that passes, I'm feeling much more competitive, which is you know, I know when the season starts in March, I'm going to be fully engrossed. And yeah, I'll be, you know, on one side going, yeah, we're not, you know, outcome driven, we're process driven. The other side of me is going, I want to win every game, which is a difficult thing to marry.
It's not too far away. Not too far away.
I think you raised a good point earlier when you talked about the difference between, or is there a challenge between being super competitive but also having a great culture? And I think there's a difference between being competitive and for high performance reasons versus being just nice, right? We can all be nice, but I think I'm a nice person, but I'm highly driven and highly competitive. And in our world, and you talk about ecosystems within sport, in our world we have multiple capabilities in multiple geographies. We work for massive clients. We have to have collaboration across lots of different geographies and agencies because we're quite a complex structure. And actually we're even shifting from an idea of collaboration, which is very different under our CEO now versus our founding CEO who fostered and really delighted in a a culture of competitiveness between agencies. That's not what clients want, right? It's not what anyone wants. They want collaboration. And in fact, they actually want integration. And that comes from a cultural change. So we've been on that terrible word journey, quite a big journey to move from being super competitive, still highly performing, but being really collaborative to the benefit, we hope, of our clients. And a nicer place to be, right?
Work,
if you're not stabbing everyone in the back.
Yeah.
I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to take read some audience questions out. There's one question here. Do you have any advice for an organisation undergoing a major change, which has some negative and positive implications? And how do you keep people engaged and motivated during that time? I think it's a great question.
I mean, I'll go first. I would say over-communicate. You probably think you're communicating. We believe we're communicating, and then you talk to people and they're like, oh, I just don't know what's going on. So actually that uncertainty is really difficult. And so adding clarity, and even if it's clarity over a timeline, is important. I think being just human about it. There will be difficult decisions to make, but you have to make them with clarity and make them with kindness. And I would say try and move at speed. But many businesses are undergoing huge transformations, but you can't. The worst thing is to put your head in the sand or stay quiet. I think communicate.
Yeah, I mean, I think back to my kind of first year at Saracens as CEO was a bit of a baptism of fire. It was crisis management 101. But I think the lens over communication, really being authentic, like letting people understand what the decisions are being made and why. And I think one of the things I got some great advice was actually kind of as a leader during those turbulent times, you do actually sometimes have to fake it slightly. So what your kind of people don't want to see is you falling about in a mess and, so albeit like go to the loo and have a cry about everything that's going on, but then walk through the office with your head held high, like it's all going to be fine, this is what we're doing, because they don't need to see that. They don't need to see the mess going on in the background.
And we've got another question on AI. Where is the best place to start your AI learning and journey if you're not confident or experienced?
I mean, I would just download ChatGPT, be aware that your information will be then go into the open web, so we have a protected version, but I would just go and experiment with that. I would go onto Google and experiment with Gemini. I would go into Facebook and experiment with Llama. These are all just different versions of LLMs, but ChatGPT is probably the easiest to access. There'll be tons of online courses as well. LinkedIn Learning does brilliant AI, but you just need to start playing with it and asking questions. Teenagers do that already. So, I mean, there is a SIOD Business School diploma in AI. It takes a year if you'd also like to do that, but I think you can just experiment yourselves.
And I think we've got time for one last question. What would you say is the key to fostering culture in teams, and should leaders define the kind of culture you should be building?
I think it's hard because yes, leaders need to define it because they ultimately need to relentlessly live and breathe it through their how they treat people, through their actions, behaviors, and you have to be authentic. If you're not authentic, you get caught out instantly. But you also need buy-in for the culture to succeed. So, certainly at Saracens and hopefully what we're building at London Mavericks was everyone talked about how you've kind of got Saracens under your skin, how it's like part of your DNA in terms of everyone bought into the values and behaviours. It was very, very clear. Everyone knew them. You probably get a bit sick of, me talking about it all the time relentlessly, but everyone knew it from the top down, like what the mission was, what we represented, who we wanted to be. And I think that's how you kind of foster it, but it is really like a 24/7 thing, and it takes a long time.
Yeah, I think a leader has to set the tone, but you might have co-creation in terms of what those values or behaviours are. And then I would say, with my functional head on, you have to then measure and track against them, and we evaluate people based on our 6 leadership behaviours. Otherwise, they're just empty words. I know we loved Believe and Ted Lasso stuck on the wall, but you've got to have a bit more meaning.
I like Ted Lasso.
You've got to have a bit more behind it, and actually then data, and you have to take consequences. If people are not living the values or not behaving in the right way, then fire them.
Wow.
Who wants to come and work with me?
I always like to end on any sort of short take-home messages for the audience, if you've got any.
Very short. I guess success isn't built overnight, and it's built on decades of accumulated continuity, which is retained and earned by genuinely caring for people.
Lindsay?
Download ChatGPT if you haven't and experiment. I'm loving reading. It's an American author, but Brené Brown, Dare to Lead, which I think is really fascinating at the moment. And she talks a lot about be a listener, not a knower. So no one likes a know-it-all, right? But being curious and continuing to ask questions, I think, will help us as people outsmart the machines.
I love that. Thank you so much, both, for the conversation, and I wish you all the best in your endeavours in 2025 with Rugby World Cup and the new league.
And Rugby World Cup. I love rugby.
Cool. Thank you so much for listening.
Thank you,
you.
Annie.